want our country. That night, though, we came back to the floor of the House, and we certified the election. I stood with Republican Congressman Tom Reed, who came to our side of the aisle and said that this could never happen again, this attack to our country and our capital, that America must always come before party. To this day, my thoughts continue to be with the brave law enforcement officers, those brutally attacked, those who lost their lives, and so many others. Someone once asked Ben Franklin, it was on 1787, at the end of the Constitutional Convention, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? A republic, replied Franklin, if you can keep it. As we are seeing in real time right now, democracy isn't easy. It can be messy and try a country's patience. But we must never forget the dark days we've been through. We must recommit ourselves to unity, civility, and truth, and embrace our calling to a higher purpose, one that helps strengthen our nation. That's the only way we will keep it. And if we do, I know we work together, always defend our right to vote, the integrity of our elections and our democracy and our great values. Our best days in the greatest country in the world will always be ahead of us. Thank you and God bless. And now let me turn it over to Dean Phillips from Minnesota.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks. As Josh said, we were among the 30 or so that were trapped in the House on January 6th of 2021. Some of you covering this press conference were there. Capitol police officers behind us were there, Capitol staff. And the most important way to begin my remarks, is to honor all of you and the country that was watching it unfold on television. And as Josh referenced, fear, gas masks, calls to family, many of whom thought they wouldn't see us again. And it is a solemn day, as it well should. There'll be hundreds of members of the press covering the recognition behind us. And the truth is, I wish more were covering this right now, because it is an example, the most important example, of workhorses, not show horses, getting together to solve a very important problem, because we recognize the fragility of democracy. And it's underreported, it's underappreciated, it's underrecognized, and has never been more important that Democrats and Republicans work together. And we did. I'm so proud to be a vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. Josh, of course, our co-chair with Brian Fitzpatrick, the Republican. The work we do is heartfelt, it's selfless, it's important, and no better evidence of the work product than what we present today, what's been accomplished. What happened in Ohio and Pennsylvania over the last couple of days, Democrats and Republicans setting aside the political swords to actually get something done. As we begin, hopefully, the 118th Congress, I do so in a spirit of hopefulness. Despite what is transpiring on the House floor right now, we do begin this in the spirit of possibility, hopefulness, and that chance that people like Josh and me and our Republican friends on the Problem Solvers Caucus can actually do what this country is all about, which is to listen to one another, respect one another, work together, and do better. And I'm so proud that we actually accomplished something that may be underappreciated right now, but I think centuries from now will be recognized as a perfect example of what our founders had intended, which is no matter your stripes, no matter your state, no matter your politics, we have a job to do, and we did it. So I want to thank you and honor all of you today as well. Thanks.
Any questions for us?
Sure.
First question is following the events of January 6th, there was a deep divide between members who sort of supported the challenge and then didn't vote for it on the floor, and mostly Democrats. Has any of that healed in the past 2 years? Is there a softening of the relationship? Is it still as tense as it was? Where are you now versus 2 years ago with those people who are ideologically different on what happened that day?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, let me start by reflecting on some of the outstanding members that we lost because of their bold positions and their courage. Josh referenced a few of them, and I think you know their names. It was difficult. It'll continue to be difficult, but the joy of this caucus, the Problem Solvers Caucus, is that despite those challenges, we're the ones that actually do sit down and find common ground and find ways to understand each other, respect each other. It's not easy, but it is exactly the behavior that we hope the rest of the country does. So I'm not going to tell you it's been joyful or everything's been forgotten. Probably never forgotten, but that doesn't change our responsibility. And And my hope is that some of the new members of Congress, both Democrats and particularly Republicans right now, come here with the recognition that the overwhelming majority of Americans do want us to work together, respect one another, and that begins with getting to know each other. You can't work with people you don't trust, and you can't trust people you don't know. So yes, we are very intentional, unlike most people in this institution, of having those tough conversations and finding the common ground, because that is our foremost responsibility.
And I'll just say that, I'll just add to that, obviously, and Dean's exactly right, there's plenty that we disagree on a regular basis, right? And I'll put that at the top of the list of one of those, divides that isn't easy to heal. But we have a responsibility and we have work to do for the country. And you can't just stop working to get things done. And if you look at the last Congress, what we got done by working together, and for everything, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, to the PACT Act for veterans, to China chips bill, to standing by law enforcement, and supporting law enforcement, you have to keep doing your job, and that's what we do. You can't just walk away, even when even when there's a lot of division and the pain is real in terms of your differences. You got to keep talking and working past it, and that's what we're focused on.
And in the spirit of that, if I can
Yeah, sure, please.
You are one of the few caucuses that are, but it is.
We're the only caucus. We're the only caucus. It's that actually meets on a regular basis with the purpose of legislating. Yeah.
And I realize that your caucus has said that they are unified in your speaker vote, but you are here to also solve problems. You have a problem on the speaker. Is there any discussion? Is there hints of a discussion to get together, try to solve this with a unity candidate that can pull from both sides, that can actually rise and get the gavel?
Well, as you might imagine, we're always having discussions and conversations. Right now, as you know, including last night, the Republicans are still working with their side to elect a speaker. That's how they're approaching it right now. And, part of our concern remains, bending to the will of a small band of extremists and the impact that will have on the ability to govern and to legislate in a bipartisan way this next Congress. If you give away the store and the ability to actually legislate and govern, that's obviously a huge concern. And we were, of course, led a reform of the rules a few years ago, the Problem Solvers Caucus. We called it Break the Gridlock, and passed a series of rules changes, including to the motion of vacate, right? Because we understood that if you just turn the keys over to a small group of extremists, the impact that could have on the ability to govern for the country. And we have a lot of work to do. So we want to get back to work. Obviously, right now, the Republicans are seeking to handle it in their own caucus, in their own conference. Obviously, we're always open to conversation and continuing to have conversation, but that's how they're approaching it right now.
And as for now, as long as they're in that posture, you're going to stay in your posture, united behind Congress objectives.
Well, we remain. We remain open to, of course, always having those conversations. But right now, this is their approach they've taken. I believe they have a call now, and we'll see what the results are.
And I say yes, but when and if those conversations begin, they're likely to begin with the people who sit at our table. Indeed, and that's what we're here for.
Jonathan.
The Electoral Count Act, when it passed the House, it passed with no Republican votes. In the Senate, even though you had 10 Republicans to overcome a filibuster, the majority of the party still opposed it. Is there really
Well, there were two different bills, as you know.
Right.
There are two different pieces of legislation. The legislation that we co-sponsored was the Senate bill, which then ultimately got into law.
Republicans on that bill, they had 10 or 12 to break a filibuster. Is there really a bipartisanship on things like protecting the election after January 6th?
I think the fact that you saw such a broad swath of senators come together that we worked with, obviously Susan Collins and Joe Manchin leading that effort in the Senate, working with us in the House on that legislation. As you know, Jonathan, not every piece of legislation is perfect. I think this takes seismic steps in a direction to protect our democracy and to prevent what happened here 2 years ago from occurring again. But the fact in the end, as you know, in the final legislation, it passed with Democrats and Republicans. And, would you like broader support? Of course, always. But the fact is, there is a significant group, and I'll remind you, in this Congress, we're facing a 4-seat majority again in the House, this time with the Republicans, 4 seats. So it'll take many of us working across the aisle to legislate.
And bipartisan is never absolute, it's relative. And Sometimes that just means one person has the courage to pursue principle instead of politics, and in this case it worked. Back to the earlier question, wounds can heal, but they can still hurt. I'm disappointed it wasn't more bipartisan. This wasn't just to protect Democratic candidates or presidents or members of Congress. This is to protect the democracy, and it legitimately does so. Clarifies old law, ensures the integrity, stability, and due outcomes of elections. That was actually the call from a lot of the people on the right to do that, to ensure the integrity of our elections. So yes, it's disappointing. And that's why we hope that there's a spirit of hopefulness as we start this new Congress.
And that is my hope. We're going to get through this. We're going to continue to face bumps here, right? But on the other side of this, you're going to have a 4-seat majority in the House, right? To legislate, especially with the group of Freedom Caucus extremists. They will have to govern. We will need to work together, right? We're going to have to work together. And I think that we saw in the last Congress that it's possible. Well, look how much we did in the last Congress with a 4-seat majority working together. And there's no reason why we can't replicate that in the next in the 118th Congress, right? There's no reason why we can't replicate that bipartisan spirit and cooperation and accomplishment. That's what the Problem Solvers Caucus is all about and what we'll be focused on from day one. We're good? Thanks, guys. Get some warmth. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're going to go into
Thank you,
Soho?
guys. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming.
Jonathan, nice to see you.